Hi everyone and welcome back to the Fly Culture podcast. The season for me is underway for salmon, and Perry and I had a warm-up the other day with a bamboo spay rod that my friend Luke Bannister has built for me. I was a little rusty, but got back into things after the long winter layoff. I've always believed that if you can get your fly from A to B with minimal effort and minimal disturbance, then you're in the game. Casting is one of the reasons I think I love fly fishing so much. My guest has multiple casting qualifications, is an instructor and guide, and will share some tips and advice that we can put to good use on the water. I'd like to welcome Chris Aldred along to the podcast. Chris, it's great to have you along. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm waiting for the weather to warm up a bit so I can get out.
Absolutely. I'm sort of a bit like you, that I'm becoming a bit fair weather the older that we get. Are you feeling a similar sort of way?
I'm at the point where I can pick and choose my days, and to be quite honest, I should be going out more often because the river's been absolutely ridiculously high all winter. I've had no chance to get out. I was out last week. I did a couple of hours, picked up a couple of out-of-season trout, which were returned to the water without being photographed and squeezed to death. And because they're out of season, don't photograph them. They were slipped back in, and it was good. I also had a beautiful silver sea trout smolt, so that surprised me. But yeah, I've been out once, but I've got up today and I thought I'll do this and I'll head to the river, and then I went outside and thought, no, I won't, it's cold.
Yeah, absolutely fair. Absolutely. And I know we were trying to do this last weekend, and the little village I live in Devon seemed to be under cyber attack, and the whole internet blew up in just our little village and Perry's village, funnily enough. So thank you for fitting me in, but I've kept you in the warm, so that's a result anyway, isn't it?
Well, I'm in my wife's conservatory. I've put the heater on. It seems to be cranking up really slowly, so I'm sat here cold, but it'll toughen me up for what's coming.
Absolutely. And you're dead right about the out-of-season trout as well. I think that's a really important thing. I think we've seen many changes in that practice anyway, and we're going to come on a little bit later to how fly fishing looks, how it feels, and the view from an instructing standpoint as well. But first of all, I'd like to learn a little bit more about yourself. I'd like to know, where are you based first off?
So I live in Bolton. I've been here, in this 22 years. Born in Liverpool, moved to Wigan as a youngster. So I grew up near all the old flashes. So I was surrounded by coarse fishing and the Leeds and Liverpool Canal. So that's what did it. I was 100 yards from the Scotsman's Flash. I learnt to pike fish on there, caught some big perch out of there, and then all the other flashes around there. So I was a coarse angler really for a long time. So yeah, but now I'm settled in Bolton, and it's lovely. I moved up here for the mountain biking, so I'm about 5 minutes from Winter Hill, which is great.
And what does that mean from a fishing perspective for you?
So fishing perspective, on a Sunday morning, I'm 35 minutes from the Ribble. I'm about an hour and 20 from the Welsh Dee, where I've done since the mid-90s. I've been fishing the Welsh Dee. And then the Ribble, I've been on it for must be 6 or 7 years on the. Plus, I used to get up to Stocks quite a lot when Ben Dobson had Stocks. Dropped down to Carsington. I've done weekends at Rutland and various other places, and then just travel around. I've been up to Scotland, down to South Wales. Used to get across to Norfolk for my pike fishing as well, when the Broads were in a better condition than they are at the moment.
So it sounds as though you're a multi-species angler, but do I detect that possibly your heart lies with the river?
Yeah, I love my river fishing. I mean, the Welsh Dee was one where I used to go to. My grandparents had a caravan in North Wales. I'll just say it's a town on the other side of Corwin, because I'm not going to try and insult the Welsh with the pronunciation, because they'll be on the phone to me and start beating me up. But it's got a big musical Eisteddfod. So and I used to course fish the canal, and I was walking along the river one day on the Welsh Dee above the Horseshoe Falls, and it was a beautiful glide, a really long sweeping glide, and there was fish rising. And I thought, well, if I want to fish this, I can. Two ways to do it. I can do it illegally, or I can learn how to fly fish. So I learned how to fly fish.
Wonderful. And let's talk about the Dee a little bit, because it's a river that so far has eluded me. I think it's mainly because I'm a coward, because the stories that I hear of, and I remember, and you'll know very well, Carl Humphreys, telling me about them, and having to wade really, really deep, and the flow of the water put me off a little bit about it. Is that a fair description? Or I'm guessing there are lots of places that you can go visit to cast a fly.
So I'm a member of Corwin District. Corwin's lovely. The only thing missing from Corwin is accommodation for the anglers. I think they miss out on that. Corwin, some of the wading is beautiful. When you think of Long Reach, it's like an upturned saucer. It's gravel and it's been raked. It's beautiful. Llangollen, you get into some of the places there, and it's sheet slate and sheet rock, and you can be in 6 inches of water, and your next step you can be in 12 foot of water. It's pretty tricky. I mean, the last time I was on that stretch, actually, I stood on a boulder that I've stood on for years, and it was about the size of a mini, this boulder. Stood on it after winter, which was a foolish thing to do, because you know what's going to happen. It moved about 2 inches, and that was me going for a swim. So some of the wading can be absolutely horrific on the Welsh Dee. It really can. It's hard going. Some of it's really, really nice.
Sounds like a typical river, really, in some respects, I guess. And that reminds me of the Usk in parts as well. Yet there are so many beautiful, easy-to-wade spots that are great fun. Let's go back a little bit as well, because you said what made you pick up a fly rod with those rising fish. It sounds a beautiful story. But what was that process for you when you decided, right, okay, I'm going to have a go at fly fishing? And as a result of that, did that sort of change how you looked at fishing, and from then onwards it became mainly fly rodding for you?
I remember the adverts in Trout and Salmon. The old guy gave, do you want to learn fly fishing? So it was one of those. And that led me to Louis Noble, who from Wrexham. So I booked a lesson with Louis. He took me out on a stretch called the Meadows, which is a beautiful stretch, where I also hooked and lost my biggest ever grayling. But the canoeists have taken over that stretch now, which is a shame, because it's a stunning piece of water. So that led me to meet Louis. Louis got me going, showed me some casts, tied me some flies. I've still got a couple of pages of handwritten notes that accompanied the flies that he sent to me. And that's what got me going. So, and that sort of led me into spider fishing with, watching Louis do that, who I think is probably one of the best in the country with a team of spiders. He just makes it look easy and elegant. And watching that, I thought, well, if that's what I want to do, then that's what I've got to try and do. And what I did from then on was I'd always have a lesson every year with Louis to refresh, or if I wanted to learn anything else, I'd refresh my knowledge with Louis, because it was the easiest way of doing it. It was just a tune-up. If you play golf, you get a tune-up now and again. If you play football, they've got football coaches. So with the fly fishing, it's quite easy for bad habits to trickle in. Although it was more difficult then, because you didn't have the YouTube and the social media as much. So it was much easier to do as Louis told you or asked you to do.
We're going to come on to how that has changed and your journey as a fly fishing instructor shortly, but you learnt from Louis, and then you decided, was that the sort of tipping point for you then? You were fishing spiders and you thought, absolutely, this is for me, fly rods for me. And was that the moment that you suddenly threw everything else away, I'll put it on eBay, and stuck with fly rods, or you continued with both?
No. I don't think eBay was around. I'm really old. So So no, I mean I still had my course gear, but the fly fishing is whenever I could get over to North Wales, and it was cheaper to get across then. Whenever I could get to North Wales, it was just easiest to pack a fly rod, a vest, and a reel, a couple of boxes of flies, and you were away. And that's what I really liked about it, was the fact that you wasn't carrying loads and loads of gear. You wasn't having to load up a trolley or, as it was, a wheelbarrow and cart your gear across a couple of fields to go and sit, fish on the canal. You could spend time on the river. The evening rise on that pool above the Horseshoe Falls used to start at about 7 p.m, 8 p.m. on a summer's evening, and I'd be there at 4 just sat watching the river. And I could sit there for a couple of hours just watching it go by. But what I also used to do, and what I also picked up, was I'd sit on the river and start picking out fish that were rising consistently. So you learn from that, whereas, jumping forward a little bit, I gave a couple of guys from a club a lesson a couple of years ago, and we got to the river and we were talking about the river, and we sat on the riverbank. I said, right, are you ready? They said, yeah. And they both jumped in the water. I said, where are you going? And they was like, oh, we're going to go fish. I said, just sit and wait. And in the space of 20 minutes, they picked out half a dozen rising fish. I said, right, would you have seen them if you'd have done your usual? So they said, no, not at all. So 2 hours I can sit and watch the river go by. And that was the bit that I really, really enjoyed about it.
That's a wonderful way to think about your fishing. And I know we talk about it a little bit here as well, about spending some time watching, waiting, marking fish. And the river gives, I've always used to say, the river gives all the clues to you if you're prepared to wait, doesn't it?
It does. One of the things you always, you get the white, it's not a foam line, but you get the white bubbles coming down. It's almost a foam line. You just sit and watch them, and you can see where the fish are and where they're picking the food up from, and it enables you to learn the river. You can. I dare say you've got guiding stories where you've said to people, listen, if you walk up there and go to, once you get to this point, you'll see a fast stream coming in. What you want to do is wade across towards the fast stream. You want to put your fly just on the other side of it. As long as you can get a drag-free drift, you'll be fine. And within 30 seconds, they're into a fish, and they look at you and they think, how did you know that? Well, you know that because you've been on the river for 25 years, and it's an obvious place for the fish to be, but not for a beginner. And everybody's that used to, everybody's short on time now where they want to get to the river, get in the river and immediately start fishing. But 20 minutes to 30 minutes at the start of a fishing session, just sat watching, is better than 4 hours just thrashing up and down through the pool.
It's a great way to pick apart the pool as well, isn't it? And to see what's happening. Like you say, the bubble line, we always used to say to newcomers, foam is home. And look for that either in on the edges of it, and that will give you the big clues. But it is the ability, and I think as a guide, and it was an interesting point that you touched on about that, is that you're reading the water the whole time, aren't you? You're looking, because your role is to find people fish. Ultimately, I know we want to teach them stuff as well, but ultimately, for many, the success of a day will be catching a fish. And as you'll well know as a guide, there is a wonderful feeling when that first fish is in the net, isn't it?
Oh, that's the hardest bit. I mean, I've got a couple, I had a guy, got to the river, it was -6. There was ice everywhere. We got to the water, it was ice on the edge. We got in the river. It was time of check nymphing. Remember that, all before the Euro nymphing and the light line? When you had grayling swimming around your feet because you wasn't shuffling your feet, disturbing the bottom on purpose, honestly. So you're teaching people that, and I had a guy and he was doing it, and he was just slightly off, and I said, look, you're just a little bit off. Let me take the rod. I'm within 18 inches of the first drift. I hooked a fish. And this is at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's -6, and at 2 o'clock I got him a fish. And he got a fish, and that was the thought of, oh, please, let's, let him get a fish. But another one, I used to do days. I did a couple of days with Louis, introduction to wet fly fishing, spider fishing. And we was on the River Dee one day. And as you say, trying to get people into the first fish is the hardest piece. But we were on the river and the Granham started coming off, so it was game over. We had 4 clients between the two of us, and every one of them had fish within 15 minutes of the hatch starting. So that was it. We were the best guides in the world.
It's a nice feeling, that. And I think also, and I often talk about the psychological aspects of fishing. And if we look at it from a guiding point of view as well, that when you've had that fish, you feel the shoulders are, yep, I am, I've justified my role as that guide that fishes in the net. And you actually feel better and probably slightly more confident as well. Do you think?
Yeah, and the other thing is the client will then listen to you.
Yeah.
Why have I not caught a fish yet? Well, you know what, you're slightly off, or I did tell you not to come in July when it was 32 degrees in the middle of the day, but you insisted. But yeah, the client listens to you, but it is hooking into that first fish is the hardest part. I've had guys on still waters where I've said, Luke, we've done everything we can today. What I'm going to suggest is you go home, get some tea. If you've got time, come back this evening at 8 o'clock. And they come back at 8 o'clock in the evening and say, right, now fish. And it looks like it's raining golf balls because all of a sudden it's been a hot summer's day and you get there in the evening and there are fish everywhere and they're willing to feed. So everything they've learnt during the day whilst getting a suntan comes back to them and all of a sudden they're into fish and they think, right, okay, yeah, he was right.
And
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say kudos for you for coming back at 8 o'clock as well with them.
Yeah. I had 4 of them. It was just, I thought, when you get there and you get to 10 o'clock and you think, this isn't going to happen today, you just knew it wasn't going to happen. It was just too hot, no breeze. I said, come back this evening. Let's cut it short and we'll come back later on.
Yeah, I like your style. So we've talked a little bit about what to look for on the river, spend some time. Observation is really, really important. And in the introduction, I talked about getting your fly from A to B with minimal effort, with minimal disturbance. Have you got a tip that for people, it's early season still, that they could employ to think about their casting, about getting that fly to a fish and hopefully it's rising for them? What casting tips or drills do you think that you could pass on to people that they could take with them to the river?
On a nickel, it's a Mel Krieger line. I think Mel Krieger was like be oily, but the way I look at it is be more like caramel. If you break a bar of chocolate that's got caramel in it, the way the caramel flows and it's just really, really nice and slow and smooth. That's it. Release your grip on the rod, right? So then all of a sudden the rod stops screaming for a little bit and take your time. That's it. Because honestly, if you rush and you end up getting frustrated and going home, there'll be jobs for you to do and you'll have to paint things or move furniture. Honestly, just relax. I mean, I was on the Welsh Day. I was practicing for one of my assessments and it was going wrong. And I phoned up Alan Rees. And I said, listen, I'm struggling with this. He said, get out the river, sit down, get a coffee, give yourself 15 minutes, get back in the river, get hold of the rod, gently, relax, and then just start casting really, really slowly and see what happens. And that was it. That was the fix. Because the more frustrated you get, the more tense you get. And as soon as you get really, really tense, you're preventing the rod and your arm and your shoulder and your body doing what you need it to do. I've got another tale, a guy I've worked with, and I still work with him, a guy called Jeff Estale. He was at the British Fly Fair. He had a series of paintings up. He's a oil painting oils, and really, really nice guy to work with. Really good joiner, carpenter. When I was teaching him one day, I was like, Jeff, relax your hand. And he relaxed his hand. I was like, Jeff. He said, what? I said, your forearm. Relax it. Okay, Jeff. I said, what? I said, your biceps, mate. Relax your bicep. All right. Jeff, what? Your shoulder. Oh, right, okay. Jeff, what? Your neck. Please just relax. And he looked at me and went, right. I said, Jeff, finally. I said, what? You're grinding your teeth. And all of a sudden, he sort of went, and once you relax and get into that habit of being relaxed, if you make a bad cast, fine, you've made a bad cast. Everybody makes a bad cast. I've seen people make bad casts and catch really big fish. It always happens. I've got a tale for later on in the Welsh Day where me and my mates were playing and a guy came along. But if you can think, let's be smooth, think like, think of anything. Think of caramel, think of, a cheese sauce as you're mixing it, or as my wife gets me stirring the sauce for the lasagna, or anything like that. Anything that's smooth and flowing. If you think about that for your casting, as opposed to trying to smash it back and smash it forwards, that will help.
That's a great tip. And I know with the guys we had working when we had the fishing school, I'd teach them to read body language in a very basic way and just look at that non-rod hand and say, look, if that's looking really tense and tight, just put the rod down, go and have a look at the river, talk to them about the river, explain a little bit about where fish live so that they reset. And it's a really good idea. And I've took on here a little bit about casting with your non-dominant hand because you learn a fair deal about your own casting. And I'm thinking that will probably translate quite well because you're more likely, if you're experienced with your dominant hand as a fly caster, you'll get a real sense of grip, won't you? And how you're holding that rod comparable to how you normally hold it as well.
Yeah, part of the assessments is to cast with your non-dominant hand. Which it comes useful, especially for the two-handed stuff. But if you can cast with your non-dominant hand, it adds a lot of things to it. So if you've got a right-handed caster and you want to help them through it, there's two ways of doing it. You can sort of put your hand on the shoulder and reach around the back of them and get hold of the rod, which is, okay, that might be okay. Or you can stand alongside of them and use your non-dominant hand to help them cast. So that's the easiest way of doing it. So that is a really good idea. I mean, one of the things I did at the British Fly Fair was, right, I'm going to cast without gripping the rod. So the rod sat in my hand and it was the rod's just flopping about, but I'm throwing loops behind me and I'm throwing loops in front of me and the line's going out and everything's looking sort of okay, but the rod's bouncing around. And I said, now, if I had a little bit of control and a little bit of control is a little bit of control. My stop is a squeeze of the hand, but it's a gentle squeeze. If a little child ran up to you and he says, "Do you want to shake hands?" You wouldn't, boys from the black stuff with old shake hands there, trying to break every bone in your body, trying to smash your hand to pieces. You just get hold of the hand and squeeze it gently, and you pretend you shake hands, and that's it. I think I read something the other day. The easiest way to relax is to relax your jaw. If your jaw's really tense, then you can't relax. So if you're nice and relaxed with your jaw, you'll be fine. I mean, the easiest way to do it, and what I find with any client is the way that they always improve the casting is if you make them chat to you while they're casting. Because all of a sudden, where they've been mouth shut and tight, start talking to them and then everything relaxes.
Yeah, it's a good tip. I used to talk to them about something not related to what we were doing so that they would not concentrate on that and concentrate on what I was asking them or relax that thing. So there we have it, folks. Relaxed is the way forward. And that season's underway. You're in the pool. You're getting yourself nice and relaxed actually before you get in it. And hopefully it will unfold. You'll see the fish move. You'll look for those bubble lines and you are up and running. Now, you mentioned BFFI. I saw you there. I saw some of your demo as well. And I saw what you were talking about with that relaxed grip too. How did you find the BFFI? And for people who don't know, it's the British Fly Fair. And it was a great way. It's in February. It's a great way for people to get together. There are people like Chris and others. Fernie, I saw doing something with the spay rod as well, doing demonstrations for people, but also the feel of it, Chris. How did the feel of it feel to you? Because I know myself, I felt it was in pretty good shape, and there was a bit of a buzz to it.
It was good. I enjoyed it. I mean, on saying that, I walked around it a couple of times because I was sat on the Corwin stand. I walked around it a couple of times, still missed half the things I wanted to see anyway, because you end up chatting. There's a guy over from Newfoundland that I wanted to have a chat with, a guy called Jamie Pike. Absolute beautiful fella, really nice flies that he ties. Watched Tim Wood try and get him into a car, which was hilarious because Jamie's 6'8", and built with it. So that was quite amusing. But you go around, you see this, there's a lot of tyres that you want to see, and a lot of people that you want to watch because it's really good. And Steve and Bridget put on a great show. If I don't mention Bridget, I'll never get back there. But they put on a really, really good show. It's nice and relaxed. A lot of people through the door on Saturday. Sunday was more steady, and it was really, really enjoyable show. And again, lots of casting demos. Carl Humphreys, Jim Fern, Phil Ratcliffe was on there, Alan Rees. And both casting organisations are there. AAP Guy and Gaia are there. I mean, we're both doing the same thing. So, take your pick. Hopefully they'll get a closer relationship in the future. I believe Alan's talking to them, which is good. Because we all teach the same thing. How is it Alan puts it? You're either stood in a river or stood in a field with an expensive piece of carbon with a plastic coated bit of string at the end of the day. So, but yeah, the BFFI, I can't remember how long I've done it for now. It's quite a while. I mean, the first time I did it was with UK Fly Dressing, one of the original forums, which was really a font of knowledge for a lot of the fly dressers. So I was on there. Paul Ainsworth, Dylan Roberts were running that, and there's a few others that are on there that helped get it going. And that's when I first went. It's over 10 years now, well over 10 years, I think. So it's been a really, really good show.
And what does that make you think about fly fishing, the shape of fly fishing? How's it looking to you? Did that give you any sort of indications? Because I've been thinking about this thing about we've got to get more people in, and that's something that will always be there. But are we shrinking or are we not? Because it seems to me, again, I've, like yourself, fished forever, and it feels as though that's a conversation that's always happened, that, oh, we're shrinking. But are we just a niche pastime that a few people participate in, and it's never going to be something that's going to explode out of control? Obviously, we're helped a little bit by COVID and how people wanted to go outside. Whether there's been a follow through from that, I can't determine. Perhaps in other countries, I think it has, but whether people stick with it or use fishing as an excuse to be able to get out, which I fully understand. But do you think we're in this position, but we've always been in this position? Has there been a change? Has things worsened, or has it just been pretty constant throughout?
We need more kids. I mean, there's more women now, which is brilliant. Because, especially as an instructor, because they tend to listen and do what you ask them and then cast really well. But we definitely need more kids. There are a few about. There's a young lad called James that's doing the rounds, that's catching lots and lots of fish. There's a lot of kids that Corwin are trying to bring through. But when you look at it, you go back, some of the kids that were coming through, especially from South Wales, was it Kieran Jenkins was spoken about for quite a while. I don't think Terry Bromwell's ever been a kid. I think he's just always been a lunatic, but he's lovely. But, you seem to have the fly fishermen bringing their kids through, but there's not a lot of other kids coming through. And we have to do something about that. And we have to take the formalities out of it. I believe golf clubs are having the same issues. We can't get kids. Well, you won't do if you're making them wear trousers and a bloody polo shirt and a uniform. Let them turn up and just play the game, and if they like it, they'll join the club and they'll stick to your rules. Same with fly fishing. All the kids' memberships up to 16 years old should be free, and just get them in, get them trying to catch a fish any way they can. If that's a worm under a bubble float, so be it. But you've got to get them into the clubs somehow.
Do you think, though, that with kids now and when we grew up, you sort of, and I've talked about it before, that, I played football, I played cricket, did some fishing, and that's how it was. Now with kids, there are so many other different things that they're being exposed to. Their schooling's different. They're in the sense of, well, I didn't go a great deal, I've got to be honest. But when I went, it was a little bit more relaxed. There wasn't this sort of pressure to perform. And I know schools, as a result of the grading systems and everything else, are under great pressure. So they need to get their numbers nice and high. And so kids are put under that sort of pressure. And so while I applaud the attempts to bring children in that Carl have done, and Charles have done, lots of people have done, that for me is a seed planting process. And I still believe that I think if that seed is there, and there'll be those people that you've talked about that have come through the system and have been around a long time now, but I used to find that the target, I firmly believe that the target is really late 20s, early 30s into 40s, rather than fly fishing, I still think is seen as a retirement hobby. But those sorts of people have got a bit more disposable income. They can join clubs. They can afford to do those things. They may have had children. Is that an area that, to me at least over the years, hasn't been exploited perhaps as much as it possibly could be?
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's things that can be done. I mean, Gaia, the FFI, and I'm not sure if Gaia have done this, but Gaia did some, and they still, I think they're looking to rekindle them, did some casting award badges. Kids love badges, it's a freebie for the kids. Corwin were pushing them out. I know I keep talking about Corwin, but I like it as a club because of what they do, and they push it. If you can get a kid getting a casting badge in the space of 20 minutes, they're happy. And then all of a sudden, that kid might say, I've got a casting badge, Dad, what have you got? Or I've got a casting badge, Mum, what have you got? And then the parent has a go at it, and they both like it. And then you get them onto a fishery, and you go back to what you said earlier, get them into a fish. That once you can do that, then you can get them hooked. I mean, I've got videos of my daughter on a beach in Dorset, and when Tony King was here, who was still alive, the old chairman of Gaia, catching mackerel on a really expensive rod, lifted them straight out the water. So, I've got videos of her doing that on one of the rivers in the Lake District. Catching trout. I cast out, hooked the fish, and just handed her the rod. Things like that. But schooling, I had an inquiry from a college that I've passed over to one of my friends, Paul Brown, and Paul's dealing with that now, where they're looking to take the kids out for, a couple of hours fly fishing tuition. That's great. I mean, the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme and things like that. I mean, these casting award badges, when they were written, it was really to try and get them into schools. But the one that you missed was the Cubs and the Scouts. My kids were in both of them, and they got to course fishing, but we could have done the fly fishing badges for them. So I think there's ways to get them involved. It's just trying to engage with them. But as you say, there's a lot going on. I was a coach. I coached a football team up until last May because I had my knee replaced. At that point, I thought, I'm not doing it anymore. I really, as much as I enjoy it, I'm at the point where I think if I'm getting bits replaced now, I need to take a step back from that. But those kids, I love working with them. They're really good fun. They're quite funny. But taking a kid from, not being able to kick a football to scoring a goal in a couple of games was incredible. And it's the same with fishing, taking a kid out and teaching them how to cast, and then from that, them catching fish and moving on. It's really, really good fun. It's just trying to, at what point do we engage them?
Yeah, my mind was going over time when you were saying that, and Cubs and Scouts and Brownies and Guides, that was just banging my head. There must be a way to engage people there. I think it would make a pretty cool looking badge, a really nice loop or something like that. That would be really cool. So perhaps somebody's listening who may well be able to help with that somewhere along the line. It would be pretty cool if that were able to happen. But while we're talking on instructing as well, and I was trying to figure while you were talking how long I've had a qualification. It's over 20 something years, something like that. How much do you think that process has changed in the time that you've been an instructor? How people are approaching fishing, their casting abilities? Is technology, is YouTube, are these sorts of things making that process a lot more easier for them to learn? And does that affect the role of an instructor? And I'm obviously got a foot in the instructor's camp that there is nothing like somebody standing next to you. But do you think that role has changed? And have you detected that over the years that you've been an instructor?
Yeah, I mean, it has changed. I mean, I've not been at it as long as you. I mean, I'm trying to think when I got my first badge was 2009. And then I went through, got my single-handed and then two-handed awards. And then I started working towards the advanced awards. And then from the advanced, I did the FFI, the Fly Fishers International. I did the master casting instructor and the two-handed master casting instructor. But the latter two was to see how I'd measure up against, what was thought to be the best award in the world at the time. So I've passed all. I've passed all of those. I mean, I didn't fish for a number of years because of doing them, but at the time I was doing them, YouTube was about, the things are about, but it wasn't as big as it is now. Now everybody used to say, "Oh, I'll get a lesson from your mate. He's been fly fishing for 20 years and he knows what he's doing," which is fine. It's great. I mean, I still remember giving my first lesson and panicking all the way through it. But it was good. It's a good starting point. I mean, when you look at YouTube now, there's some absolute shite on there. There really is. There's some really good instruction on there. Simon Gorsworth's on there. There's a lot of really, really good instruction on there. The name's just gone complete. Andrew Toft,
Yeah,
he's on there.
Definitely.
You look out good casters that can do it. Scott McKenzie. There's a lot of good people out there on YouTube, and it's really, really good. But there's some absolute dross on there where people are getting it wrong and getting it badly wrong. And I've done it where I've given lessons to people and they listen to you and they go away and they're casting beautifully. Then they'll watch YouTube for a week and they'll come back to you a couple of weeks later saying, "I don't know where I've gone wrong. I've done this and I watched this on YouTube." And you look at it and it's just, yeah, well, let's explain what he's done wrong and then we can fix you. And people get hooked up on rods, reels, lines, technology. It's this rod will help your line track better. Well, yeah, it will, as long as you're not swinging your arm round out to the side and twisting your body at the same time. And then, I fell into the habit on YouTube and a bit of social media. You become part of the casting police, don't you? You realise you're doing that wrong and you've done this and you should be doing that. And I thought, what am I doing? Back out of it. Just keep your gob shut, because there's enough casting police out there trying to tell you that translation and rotation are the new buzzwords instead of stroke and arc. And, oh, you said load the rod instead of bend the rod. Bugger off. Seriously. But does it matter, apart from between you and your circle of friends that are doing things? I mean, some of the stuff that's come out, guys shooting at 600 frames per second and things like that, it's brilliant. But you can't do that at a show when you got 15 people lined up wanting 10 minutes of your time. So some of it is really good. I mean, the role of an instructor is, I've done a lot of mentoring as well. So I think there's about 36 awards being given out, and I've worked with people. I've dropped lucky. I've worked with really good people that I come through at the same time. Philip Maher, Leslie Holmes, Willie Holmes, Alan Rees, Mark Patterson, the one from Ireland, not the one up in Scotland. They joined the organisation and lifted the organisation. Louis Noble was there, Mark Roberts, Phil White with all of his fishing experience and all that. And you learn off all of them. So as an instructor, I got to learn from, one of the best sea trout anglers I think there is. some of the best salmon anglers. One of the guys who's now in Florida running a saltwater school. Willie's in Chilliwack, just outside of Vancouver, running Pacific Rivers Outfitters, so for the steelhead and all the salmon that the Canadians have got. So I've learnt from those guys. I've watched Andrew Toft demonstrate. You mentioned Jim Fern. You watch Jim Fern at shows, and you always pick something up. It's like everybody thinks that because you're an instructor, you do your badges, and then that's it. You never look back. Oh yeah, I've learned everything. Last year I was in Canada with Jeff Estale that I spoke about earlier. And I watched Willie Holm give him a 5-minute Skagit lesson. Now I've been fly fishing for 25 years. I've been instructing for quite a long time. I've been guiding. I've given loads of Skagit lessons, but I stopped my fishing just to watch Willie give this 5-minute Skagit lesson, and I picked so much up from it because Willie's living and breathing it. So you've got all that with instructors. And what I find as an instructor, and what I've found throughout the years, is one of the biggest things I've done with clients is change the line that they're using, or change the shooting head, or take them from a mid-belly spay line to a shooting head. That's been the biggest, which is my excuse for buying so many lines and having 12 different Skagit heads, and probably 40 or 50 tips to go with it. But that's for an instructor, I'm trying to intercept clients on the way up to Scotland. Come and see me before you get to Scotland and have a couple of hours, have a brush up, because you talk to gillies up there, and they say, we get guys coming here, they have the same week every year. In the first 5 days, we're teaching them how to cast again. And really, that's why I used to get my yearly tune up or whatever I could, or if I bump into any of the guys that I've worked with, let's have a look at what we're doing. You get together. But for a member of the public, honestly, it's people learn in 3 different ways. So there's audio, there's visual, and there's kinesthetic. So kinesthetic, when can I put my hands on you to help you? Only with their permission. I've worked with people who just say, look, I want you to do this, 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 and this, and they'll just do it. I've worked with other people that you make a cast, they watch you and just mimic you perfectly. So it's working that out. So if you've got somebody that actually needs a hand on the shoulder and a hand on the rod, how can they learn from YouTube? Or if you've got somebody that needs to be told what to do in 3 steps, they can't learn from YouTube, but they'll keep bashing away. And that's why you'll get people that will go out, they'll buy all the latest gear, they'll learn from YouTube, and 6 months later, the gear never gets touched again.
Yeah. Yeah. Was
that a rant?
No, that was a fair point. And that sparked loads of questions in my mind, and you're dead right. And that's circled round to, there is nothing better than somebody standing next to you. I always say, look, if you're going to watch it, and I don't teach anymore, and it's fascinating that I don't even look as a casting policeman anymore, because I don't look in that way unless there's something that's particularly shocking. But Emma will sit there and say, God, that was a terrible cast. I think, yes, my work has been done. So she sees those sorts of things as well. And she's a wonderful example of watching. And I found a memory of her spay cast and doing a single spay. I'd never explained to her how to do one, yet she'd watched me do it because she was a circle spay angler. And she just picked it up and went straight away. The moment I explained, she said, well, what about this? I said, no, just do what you're doing. It's going out. It's absolutely fine. Don't analyze it. Just let it go. But the fascinating thing with the videos as well is what you say. I always say, just look at Simon Gorsworth, because you'll have everything just about across the board. But like you say, Andrew Toft's are beautiful, and there are others as well. But it makes me think about this modern world in a different way, because I wonder some of this is just, and I saw something the other day and I thought, all you're trying to do is create content. And I understand that but it wasn't from that point of view. So there is a pressure to want to create content for your Instagram story or your Facebook story or whatever, TikTok, whatever that is as well, to make sure that you're in front of people, and I'm using inverted commas, as an expert, because some may not be, but there's a pressure in a different way then, isn't there, to have to put this out without thinking, because I always, when I used to write a blog even, and that's going back because I'm sort of at the back end of, or where YouTube was getting going. But the first thing I thought about when I pressed live or pressed return was, what will my contemporaries think? That was the first thing. Are they going to say, well, he clearly has no idea what he's talking about, but I made sure that I covered everything that I was going to do. And I didn't do casting videos, but I might talk about fishing or whatever that may be. But no matter what that is, we do think about, there's a responsibility, isn't it? Because you're representing fly fishing instructors as a whole, aren't you?
Yeah. I did an article for the FFI magazine in the Loop about a double spay. You did a video link to it as well. And what was the phrase? Rotational momentum. So there you go. I got that phrase in there, and I expected somebody to jump all over me. And all that is when you do a double spay. So a double spay, generally, you're going to go 90 degrees across the river. So what people do is they immediately stop. They form the D loop 90 degrees opposite to where they want to go. But you're rotating. So as soon as you form the D loop 90 degrees opposite to where you want to go, because you've rotated, that line doesn't immediately stop moving. It keeps rotating around the back of you. Now, it's all right with a small fly, but if you've got a 3-inch copper tube on you, it'll hit you like a bullet. So what I said was, right, so when you sweep and circle up after you've made your D loop on a double spay, stop at 45 degrees off your casting shoulder and circle up at that point. Because then, because your line is anchored at the rod tip and it's anchored on the water, that bit of rotational momentum will carry the line, and by the time you deliver, your D loop's 90 degree opposite where you're going to aim for. So it's not hooking around the back of you, so you don't end up with a new piercing and a load of people at the hospital laughing at you. So I put that in, and I thought, somebody's going to get me for that. And nobody did. Maybe they'll come back at me after this podcast and say you're talking crap. But it works. It does work. Just because you've got to make a cast at 90 degrees doesn't mean that you have to stop the rod opposite it, because you've got that big, expensive, plastic coated piece of string that's going to go wherever it wants.
Yeah, I like your style.
And it makes me, like you just mentioned a phrase there, saying, "Oh, did you see that?" I used to do that. I used to fish with Paul Ainsworth and Dylan Roberts, and I always used to say, "Oh, did you see that?" And they'd say, "What?" And they'd be looking at the water. I said, "That cast, it was beautiful." So I'm not allowed to fish with them anymore.
So we're going to move on a little bit. And one of the things I've wanted to have you on the podcast for a long time, but one of the things I really like about you, and listeners will get a sense, is that you march to your own beat. And I love people who do that. And you'll speak up if something needs saying. Again, I like that as somebody who does that. And you talked about tackle, and we're going to come on to Skagits and double handers, because I think that segues beautifully onto a passion of yours. But I look at, and again, we're in a different world where it seems as though that getting sponsorship from companies operates in a slightly different way. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I've loved the way that where you've looked for companies, you've gone completely different, and you're working with Epic at the moment, which I think the term fly fishing entrepreneur could be used too easily, but Carl McNeil for me is a fly fishing entrepreneur. The things that he's done with fiberglass rods, the packaging of kits with Epic was outstanding. I think that, along with Cameron Mortensen and the Fiberglass Manifesto and others, helped kickstart the interest in fiberglass rods again. But I'm fascinated to know why you chose Epic and why you're working with them. And for people who don't know so much about Epic rods, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about them.
I begged Carl. I said, please use me. I was Alan Rees. I did a lot of work with Alan Rees, a lot of photos, a lot of casting with Alan. So Alan got me in with Loomis. And then Loomis came out of the UK at a time which I still don't understand why the powers that be pulled Loomis from the UK just as they releases 2 new ranges of rods. But anyway, that's another story. But Epic, I sort of got in touch with Carl on Facebook because I bought a 480 kit. So that's 4 foot 8 weight. That'd be great, wouldn't it? And an 8 foot 4 weight fiberglass, and I built it myself. And I fished with it, and it was my absolute go-to perfect summer evening dry fly rod. It was beautiful. You could just fall asleep and cast it, and it'd just do everything you wanted. And you could also throw a full line through it. You could hammer it, and it'd throw a full line if you wanted it to. Beautiful to fish with. And I got in touch with Carl on Facebook and said, "Luke, I'm available. Are you taking any people? Do you want anything?" I had a conversation with Carl. He sent me 3 rods to have a play with, which was the 8130, which is a 13 foot 8 weight, 6-piece, which fits into your suitcase, which is perfect for upcoming trips or any trips you've got. He sent me a 9 foot 6 weight, which was the 690C. And I think after that, I got the 411, which is a trout spay rod, which is, I could nymph with it. It's beautiful. And what I like about Carl is he's got a range of rods, and that's it. That's the range of rods. So he's got the custom built, and he's also got the factory built. The factory built rods are still using Fuji fittings, top end fittings. They're beautiful. I've got another 8130C, so I've got the sort of factory built, and I've got they call it the reference, and I've also got the custom built, and they're gorgeous, they're beautiful. It's the same quality fittings, really nice. I mean, I like some of the guarantees on it. The fiberglass rods, I think one of the lines on it is, if you break one of these, tell us how you've done it, because we've not managed it yet. And they've got they've got a 12 weight rod that they're using for tarpon, which is incredible. I bought the 888, which is the 8 foot 8 weight, which I use for my pike fishing. I've also got the 8 foot 10 weight, which I use for my pike fishing. There's a guy in Ireland, Norbert Renaud, that uses them, and some of the stuff he's doing, it's incredible. But you get all the blurb with a lot of rods. This will help you tracking, and this will do this, and this will do that. And there's a Q&A on the Epic site, and I read it, and I just hurt myself laughing because, if I buy an Epic rod, will it make me a better caster? And the answer to that is, if you're a shit caster now, all you'll be is a shit caster with a better rod. And it was just, I loved it. It's sort of, yeah, I like that, because I've had guys come in, this rod does this, this, and this. You just drop it on the floor and you lay it down. It's, what are you doing? I said, I'm waiting for the rod. You told me what it's capable of. I'm just waiting to see it do it. So at that point, I just had a laugh. And some of the comments with Carl, he's straight talking. It's great. The products that they've got out, I've not had a rod off them yet that I've thought, I don't like this. All my salmon fishing now is done with 13 footers. They've got a 13 foot 6, 13 foot 7, a 13 foot 8 weight. They're all really nice. I've got the 9 foot 5 weight in graphene as well, which is just a beautiful rod to cast. But I've also got the fiberglass, which are just put a smile on your face casting with them. They really do. And some of the fish you see people landing with them, the 686, which is their go-to streamer rod, that is just a laugh, because I've got a short Skagit header for one of mine, and I can hit the other side of the river with it, and it's just a beautiful rod to play with.
Nice. I can see how you fit quite nicely with Carl as well from that point of view, and I think of his casts that catch fish, bullshit free, just packed with information. I'm not using the most expensive rod out there. This is the rod because I like it, and I really like him. We've talked for quite some time now about him coming on the podcast. So, Carl, if you're listening, I'm coming knocking soon as well. It's about time we caught up. It's been a little while, but I think that's a wonderful fit. And I like, and we'll shout about stuff that's different as well and not mainstream. And I think that's why I'm talking with you right now as well from that point of view. You touched on Skagit heads. You touched on rods that will fit in your suitcase. Before we sort of segue towards the end, steelhead, what do you think?
I need to catch more of them. My last trip was a bloody disaster. Thank you, British Airways.
Oh, no.
I had a 7-day trip over there and my luggage had 5 of it. Sat with BA. So, yeah, that was a disaster. You're trying to cram in 7 days fishing into 2. I mean, Willie Holmes again at Pacific Rivers, he helped us out. He sorted us out with waders and rods and flies. But, you know, when you've prepared for a trip, you've tied your flies and you've got your gear and you've messed about with heads and tips and worked out what you're going to use and you're picturing some of the runs, you know, it's quite difficult to get your head around it. I mean, what really triggered it, I mean, I had the invite from Willie for years to get over there, and then a couple of podcasts from April Vokey over Christmas whilst drinking, and then I messaged Willie and said, can I come over and catch a steelhead? And I think his response was, it took Ian Botham 10 years to catch a salmon. What hope do you think you've got? So I thought, right, okay. He said, when are you thinking? I said, well, when do you say? He said, I'll come over in March. So this was about December the 27th. So by New Year's I'd booked. I was ready to go. That first week I went over, saw fish being caught a beautiful fish of about 16 pounds. Absolutely mint, wild fish as well, so that was nice. But I think even if it had been a hatchery, it'd have gone straight back anyway. Really loved it, loved being out there. Then they had some big floods and everything, which completely changed the river over there. So again, it's like learning a new river for everybody out there. But love it. I've been speaking to Stuart Foxall a lot, getting some tips from Stuart. And he doesn't really give much away because he's just keeping all the spots for himself. The git. But I'm in Canada again in October this year. I'm going with the family. The kids want to go. I'm going to watch an ice hockey game because I've got 2 kids that play ice hockey. We're staying with friends, and then I've got a couple of days on the end. I think Coho will be around, so I'll be fishing for Coho. And then early next year, it's Argentina with Phil Ratcliffe. So I'm trying to tie flies for 2 different trips. And I've got to mention Mel Wood on this, Melvin. He sent me a load of flies for Argentina that he tied. And they're incredible, really nice flies. So I've got to try and copy them and make them look good, make mine look as good as his. But again, with the rods, you know, the epics, the 6 pieces, you know, years ago, a 6-piece rod was good for growing your tomatoes up. But these new 6-piece rods are really, really nice. You know, the light, the beautiful. And the other thing that Epic have done, they've done this sort of true fit. So if you break a section of the rod, they'll just send you a section, it'll fit. You know, there's none of this send your rod back. So they've got all that going on. But yeah, upcoming trips, I'm still trying to work out what rods I'm taking. It'll give me an excuse to buy more gear anyway.
Yeah,
have a play.
Absolutely. That's part of the fun, I think. And Argentina, you're going to love. So I hope that lives up to expectation for you. We're just coming up an hour now. It's absolutely flown by. Yeah. Give me a song for the Fly Culture Music playlist.
Oh, now you've pulled it out. East of Eden, Big Country. There you go. Let's go back to the 80s. I love Stuart Adamson. Followed him from the Skids. Huge fan of Big Country.
Perfect.
So, yeah, East of Eden, I think.
That's fantastic. Well, I've written that down. I will add that. It's ever growing. So we got plenty of songs on there if you would like to look. It's always the question people dread the most. And that one I just fired completely blankly at you as well. You had no idea that one was coming as well. So thank you for answering that one. If people want to have a lesson with you or chat with you, how do they get hold of you? What are your contact details?
So it's flyfishlancashire.co.uk or .com is the easiest way to get me. Or I think I've got Chris Aldred 68 or Chris Aldred Fly Fishing on Facebook, but Flyfish Lancashire will take you to all my socials as well. Got a lot on there. I need to get more videos made.
Is that ironic? Yeah.
No, you know what? I've just traded in all my camera gear. I'm looking at a new camera because when I think of doing it, I think, I can't be bothered lugging all that gear. I just want something that will do everything. So trying to do it with a GoPro doesn't really work. So I've got the cameras and the microphones. It's just finding time to do it. I think the last video I did was for a guy in South Africa. He just got a switch rod from Carl, and I was stood in the middle of the river shouting at the camera, telling him how to do it, while a load of about 50 or so dog walkers were on the opposite bank walking past and saying, just looking at me as I'm screaming at the camera because it was windy, saying, and then what you need to... And I thought, no, I really need to up my game and get a couple of little cameras. So that's a little microphone. So I've got the clip-on mics now. So I need to have another go at remaking that video for him.
Fantastic. And they'll be worth watching, folks. So if you get a chance, you'll learn something as well. I'm sure you've learned something from Chris today as well. Patience is good, and spend time enjoying where we are and let the river give all the clues out to you. Chris, it's been brilliant to catch up. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast.
Okay, thanks very much.
Well, everyone, this has been another episode of the Fly Culture podcast. Thank you so much for listening. As ever, there'll never be any charge for these. These are always free. So I hope you'll continue enjoying these. And as ever, there'll be some more coming very, very soon.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly published magazine owned and run by fly anglers. When it comes to fly fishing, we've got you covered.